In this week's video, I'm sharing ways you can use Dollar Tree fabric in your fall projects. No sewing required. I hope you enjoy. For our first project, I am using this gorgeous fall plaid fabric from Dollar Tree. I am taping this on the left-hand side to make sure that I can keep this as straight as possible, and using a ruler and one of Dollar Tree's rotary cutting blades, I cut that down to 4 inches wide and 12 inches long. I'm going to set this on my heating mat and go over it with the iron to make sure it lays perfectly flat. Then I'm going to find the center of it on the back side, and using one of these wooden pumpkins. I found this one at Hobby Lobby, but you can use any pumpkin that you want, but this one was the perfect size for this project. I'm going to trace this out with a fine tip Sharpie marker, and then using a utility knife very carefully cut the image out. You can save your fabric pumpkin for another project. We're just going to use this larger portion with the cutout. I am going to flip this over on the back side, set it down on a piece of wax paper, and apply a layer of Mod Podge around the outline of the pumpkin, because we're going to be attaching this to a glass mason jar. Now mine does not have any designs on the front of it, so that is pretty important. If you're going to be wrapping it with fabric, you don't want that design to poke through your fabric. I'm placing my pumpkin cutout in the center of the mason jar, and then I'm going to go around all of those edges to make sure that it adheres flat. Then we can apply a layer of Mod Podge underneath the fabric, and depending on if you want your glass to be crystal clear, you would just apply the Mod Podge directly under where the fabric goes, but I want mine to have that semi-transparent look, so I'm going to go over the entire mason jar. Then you can push your fabric back down and apply another layer of Mod Podge over top of your fabric. Of course, I went back and got the bottom and the top and where the pumpkin cutout is to make sure that all of the glass will look the same. Continue to do this until you have all of your fabric adhered to your jar, and make sure to get that last little bit where the fabric overlaps at the very end to seal that one piece of fabric on top of the other. Then set it to the side and let it completely dry. This is how it looks completely dry. You can stop there, but I want to add something to the top of mine, and I am going to add some twine. Now I'm going to hot glue this around the bottom part of the rim until I make at least one pass all the way around. Then I can just wrap it around, just periodically placing some hot glue to make sure it stays in place. And I wanted mine to be a little bit thicker, so I do wrap it twice. And this is how it's looking so far. I'm using some mini pine cones, and this is called table scatter or filler that you can find at Hobby Lobby. It does have some miniature white pumpkins in it, but I only want to use the pine cones for this. I'm also using a Dollar Tree fall pick. I love the rustic colors of the leaves on this, as well as that pumpkin. A berry pick from Hobby Lobby, which has coordinating colors of my leaves, and it's going to give me a variation of height in our floral arrangement. Of course, I had to add in some larger pine cones, and then I have this pumpkin pick that has these beautiful brown leaves. Now, if your leaves are kind of curled up, maybe they were like that when you bought it or while it was packed away, you can set this on a heating mat and just very gently go over it with your iron. You don't want to leave it on there too long, but just long enough to straighten those curls out, and it will look brand new. Now I'm going to add that to the front of the floral arrangement, and this is how it turned out. For this project, I'm using a piece of cardboard and a pumpkin. This sign came from Dollar Tree. Just pick out one that you like the shape. We're just going to be using this as a guide to trace out, and then I'll use my utility knife to cut this out. Now you could also use a pair of scissors or an X-Acto knife, just depending on what you have on hand. I'm going to use a fine grit sandpaper to go around the edges just to make sure they're nice and smooth. We're going to be using this gorgeous fall fabric from Dollar Tree that has the most adorable mushrooms on it. And for every piece of fabric in this video, I am going to make sure that I press them with my iron to make sure that they are wrinkle free. Then we could take our cardboard cutout, and I'm going to cut this down to a little bit more of a manageable size because we will flip this over and trace it out with a fine tip Sharpie marker and cut this out with our scissors. I'm cutting on the outside of the line that we traced out to make sure I have enough fabric to cover our cardboard pumpkin and that none of the edges are showing. To attach this to our cardboard, I'm going to use some hot glue, and I like to do this in sections at a time. Let that glue set up and then move to the next section. I'm going to flip this over and trim the fabric down as close as possible because I want to trim the edges of this using some twine and hot glue. Again, I'm just going to do this in small sections at a time by applying the hot glue right there at the very edge and then setting the twine on top of it to make sure it takes the shape of the pumpkin. In Hobby Lobby's fall decor section, I found the most beautiful faux leather word cutouts. I'm going to hot glue the word thankful to the center of the pumpkin. I will also be using one of Dollar Tree's wooden signs. It already has a hanger on it. I thought that the background of this sign matched perfectly with the leather and the frame itself matched perfectly with our fabric. I am going to put a generous amount of hot glue on there and attach this right in the center of the wooden sign. Have y'all ever heard of a punched canvas? It has been all over social media, and it's a project that I wanted to give a try this fall. You'll need a canvas. I'm using an 8x10 from Dollar Tree, and you'll need a canvas board. That's the flat boards. I didn't have one, so I started off by using a piece of foam board from Dollar Tree. Don't do that. It doesn't work because once you add a layer of Mod Podge to it and it dries, it gets all bumpy and wrinkly, and it's not as flat as I wanted it to be. It would have been easier for me to just run to Dollar Tree and get one of those flat canvas boards, but I didn't feel like leaving, so I'm just going to use one of Dollar Tree's MDF signs and trace out the back of my 8x10 canvas and cut that down with my utility knife. You only have to score it about 3 times, flip it over, and it'll cut straight through. Then I'm going to add a layer of Mod Podge all over the back part of the sign, making sure I get all the way to the edges. I'm going to set it to the side and let that dry. I'm using a napkin from Hobby Lobby, but you could certainly use fabric for this. I just didn't have any fabric that had a solid design on it. You'll want to remove all of the back plies of your napkin so you're only left with that top layer. And now that the Mod Podge is dry, I'm going to center that up on top of that board using a piece of parchment paper to set over top. That's going to protect my iron from the glue, and then I can take my iron to go over top of that to seal that napkin to the board. Now I'm going to have to piece mine together because I want to make sure there is a design on the entire sign. In case I cut my canvas wrong, I don't want it to show just that brown part of the sign. Then I'll take some fine grit sandpaper to go around all of the edges and remove that excess napkin. Then, using the 8x10 canvas itself, I'm going to add a brown acrylic paint in the color Coffee Bean. This will take 2 coats. I didn't paint the outside edges because I want to cover mine with something else. So let that dry, and this is where your fabric's going to come in. I'm going to use this beautiful design from Dollar Tree. You'll want to cut this down so that it will fit on the inside back part of your canvas. So now that the front part is dry and I've cut this down, we're going to attach that using some Mod Podge. Make sure you spread an even layer all the way to all of the edges, and use a very generous amount because some of this canvas will absorb that Mod Podge. Place your fabric with the pattern side up and then add another layer of Mod Podge. You'll want to use a fabric that you think is going to look well with your coordinating napkin and the color of the front of your canvas, because this fabric will be seen once we cut the canvas so it looks like somebody punched through it. This is the part you'll see in the very front of your canvas. Make sure you let that thoroughly dry. Then take your canvas that's now dry and line up the design that you want on the back side of it to peek through. Once you determine exactly where you want that to be, take a utility knife and cut that right in the center, and then we're going to make slits all across. So it just depends on how you want yours to look in the front as to how many slits or cuts that you make. I went just straight across, horizontal, vertical, and then cut those with the scissors. It made cutting it a lot easier. So if I had to do this over again, I would cut different lengths and different sizes. I kind of cut mine all the same, so when it's finished it almost looks like a sunflower, but just depending on what you want your project to look like. So once you peel these back, this is what you're going to see is that fabric, and then you can adjust the length of whatever you need to cut, and we're going to glue the edges of those down to the canvas itself. Once you have all of that cut, go ahead and remove your picture from the back side so you don't get any hot glue on it. You're going to put some hot glue right there on the tip of that triangle and press it down to the canvas. Now you can make your curls a little bit different by taking that corner and pushing it closer towards the center. It's just going to make it pop out a little bit more. Or you could pull the corner a little bit more to the left or to the right, just depending on how you want it to look. Once you have all of your corners glued down, you can then take your canvas board, or in our case, a sign with the design on it, and we're going to place that behind the canvas itself and attach it using some hot glue. You could paint your outside edges of your sign or your canvas board and your canvas the same color as your canvas. I decided to hot glue some gingham ribbon around mine just to create this really beautiful border. I am so looking forward to doing a couple of these for Christmas. I think this will be so beautiful with some Christmas cards in the center. For this project, we're using one of Dollar Tree's wooden layered pumpkin signs. Remove the hanger and the raffia bow at the top, as well as that glue that was holding it on. We're going to add one layer of white chalk paint, or you could use acrylic paint, over this entire sign, including those edges. Now once it's dry, we are going to take some Mod Podge and add that strictly to the top part of those raised wood pieces, trying not to go over the edge. Once you have that on all 3 of those wood pieces, you take the fabric of your choice, and I'm going to use this beautiful orange fabric with white pumpkins and sunflowers that I found at Dollar Tree. Lay that flat over top of the raised portions and only push it down on those raised portions. Then you're going to take a piece of parchment paper and your mini iron. You're going to go over that just to seal that fabric to those raised portions. Once you have that done, you'll let it cool off a bit, and you're going to take a utility knife and very carefully go around just the edge of each of those raised portions. Just take your time, be real careful, and don't worry about if it's not perfect. We can fix that at the end. You just want to remove all of that excess fabric in between all of the raised layers. Once you have cut around all 3 of those layers, you can then take a pair of scissors and trim off any excess and kind of create those sharp details around the corners. Just make sure that you remove any extra strands or pieces of fabric before you take your Mod Podge and go over top of each of the pieces of fabric, but also go around the edges with your Mod Podge and push any extra fabric up against those edges to give it a clean, finished look, and then let your Mod Podge dry. You could stop right there, but I decided to add a bow, so I made a simple bow using some burlap trim from Dollar Tree and just tied that in the middle with some twine. Then using a larger piece of burlap, I'm going to attach that bow to the center, wrap the twine around on each side a couple of times and double knot it in the back, but leave your twine on there and take both ends of that to feed through the hole at the top of the sign. Then tie a knot on the back, keeping your bow in place, and then you can tie a knot at the other end to create your hanger. Now you could always go back and add a little bit of hot glue to make sure your bow stays in place, but mine stayed in place just fine. Maybe you have a piece of fabric that you just absolutely love the design on, and I love this orange one. You can make some wall art out of this just by taking a frame. This one came from Dollar Tree. Now I've previously used it in another DIY, but I like the frame itself. And I'm going to take some poster board and cut that down just to cover this up so you won't be able to see any of that design through the fabric. I'm going to attach that using some hot glue to the backing of the frame. Then I can trace out my fabric and cut that down. Then we're going to attach our fabric to our poster board or backing from your sign using some hot glue. The key to this is to make sure when you add your hot glue at the very beginning that you really let it cool down and set up before you move to the next section, because you are going to need to pull this fabric to make sure you keep it tight, and you don't want it to pull up from where you glued it at the beginning. Just continue to do that. Let the glue cool off before you move to the next section. Now you can display this in your home as a beautiful piece of fall art. For this project, we're using a wood plaque that you can find at Dollar Tree that has this nice routed edge to it. I'm going to go around this piece with some antique wax and then wipe it off with a wet wipe to blend it in. And this is going to give it a nice stained look. I'm not going to paint the top part of it, but I am going to paint the back, because of course we're going to cover the front with this gorgeous fabric from Dollar Tree. I'm going to pick out the design that I want to use and cut that down to a smaller size so that we'll be able to cover our wood plaque with this. We're going to attach it with some Mod Podge, making sure I don't go over the edges. I just want it on that top portion of the plaque. Center up the design and then push our fabric down. Then you'll go over it with another layer of Mod Podge, making sure again you don't go over those edges. You just want it on that top portion. Let it thoroughly dry before you take an X-Acto knife or a utility knife to trim the excess fabric off. If you can't get it close enough with that, you can go back with a pair of scissors and trim it up even closer, but you can also use a fine grit sandpaper, or in my case, a finger sander, to go over that and really get those nice clean lines. And then any threads that are sticking out, you can take your scissors and go over that. You'll do that for all four sides, and I think this would be a beautiful accent piece on an end table or even a tier tray. I'm using this tag-shaped sign from Dollar General for $1. I love the picture on the front, so we're not going to mess with that. We're going to be putting this gorgeous fabric on the back. This has a beautiful barn and a fall truck and a cute dog. So I am going to line my sign up so I am able to trace and cut this out with a pair of scissors. And I want this to be able to be a two-sided sign, so I want to make sure I keep everything separated from the front and the back so I can switch this out through the seasons. Of course, we're going to attach our fabric using a good layer of Mod Podge, and then once we have our fabric pushed down, we will go over that with another layer of Mod Podge. Let that completely dry, then you can flip it over and trim any of your excess fabric off. I want to create a bow for this, so I'm going to take some dark burlap, some green ribbon, and then I'm also going to use some brown ribbon from Dollar Tree in their fall section, as well as some orange, and I'm going to cut 4 strips of each of those so we can make a messy bow. You just want to alternate your colors and kind of crisscross them. Then we'll tie them in the center using a piece of twine. Double knot that on the back, and then I decided I wanted to wrap a piece around each side to kind of make that twine a little bit thicker in the middle. Then I'll double knot that again on the back and trim any of the excess off. Make sure to pull all of your bow pieces apart so the colors are going in opposite directions. We're also going to be using 2 leaves. These came off of a pick from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to glue those down at the top part of the sign as well as that messy bow. And I decided to add in a few pine cones right in the center. I added 3, and this is how it turned out. I hope you enjoyed today's projects, and if you have a favorite, let me know in the comment section down below. I always love to know which one is your favorite. For more fall inspiration, make sure to check out my fall series playlist. The link to that is in my description box below. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please take care, and I will see you guys next time.